Welcome to the U.S. Daily Brief channel. Despite the advance of the Russian army in Severodonetsk, the Ukrainian armed forces carries out several successful attacks on Russian army positions in Donbass and destroys key equipment and areas. While Russia's losses in Donbass are increasing, it still seems to have reached the city center of Severodonetsk. In the statements made by Ukraine, it was announced that the Russian army destroyed all the bridges reaching the city of Severodonetsk in order to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces. It is reported that 80% of Severodonetsk is again in the hands of Russia. The Ukrainian armed forces also suffer losses in these conflicts. However, it is observed that the losses of the Russian army are much heavier. Russia has to give up a lot in order to take over the city. The Ukrainian armed forces dealt a heavy blow to the Russian army by hitting 4 Russian ammunition depots and command centers in the last week. 3 Russian ammunition depots and a command center post were wiped off the map within 24 hours in the intense attacks launched the previous day. After a series of successful Ukrainian attacks, the Russian ammunition depots are burning into a fireball. In a second and third wave of attacks, buildings in large Russian ammunition depots were destroyed by the explosion of ammunition. After the relentless bombardment, only the bare infrastructure of the warehouses remained. The soldiers of the 44th Artillery Brigade of the Ukrainian Land Forces carried out a second attack immediately after the first attack. In a statement, he stated that they discovered the warehouse that the Russian army used to facilitate bombing the villages in the region and that they carried out the attack and destroyed the warehouse. The attack was carried out with the help of aerial reconnaissance of the 81st Aircraft Brigade of the Ukrainian Airstrike Forces. In addition, the Ukrainian Army Eastern Operational Tactical Group destroyed a Russian observation post and 2 ammunition depots in eastern Ukraine. Together with this, a Russian-backed command post in Rubizhne used by Chechen fighters fighting on behalf of Russia has been targeted by the Ukrainian armed forces. In addition, the 80th Air Assault Brigade destroyed the base of the world-famous mercenary group Wagner Group, which was operated on behalf of Russia. As for our special forces and our artillery, we have 3 examples of their coordinated work. They attacked a Wagner PMC base in Stakhanov. Only 1 person survived there, Luhansk Regional Governor Sergei Haidai said in a statement. In total, 3 ammunition depots, 2 Russian outposts and a Russian mercenary base were destroyed in 48 hours last week. The head of the Luhansk region also said that a group of Russian soldiers meeting at the House of Chemists was eliminated. Russia paid the price of these losses in the region, and the Russian attacks in the region were interrupted to a great extent. However, Russia's progress at the moment has come as the war turned into a reciprocal arms conflict where it was a little more advantageous for Russia. This was the main purpose of the Russian army when withdrawing from Kiev. The Russian army, which was spread over a wide area, lost control while fighting in different regions and had to return with losses without making any progress. The main reason for the start of the Donbass operation was that Russia used its weapons more effectively in a smaller area and the Russian army acted more organized and used its high-tech weapons more efficiently. At this point, the war in Ukraine, which is almost in its 4th month, has now completely turned into an artillery war. With its defeated strategy, the Russian army is looking for new breakthroughs in Donbass, where it has been for more than a month. Both the Russian army and the Ukrainian armed forces are currently trying to prevail in the key city of Severodonetsk and its surroundings. It is known that the Ukrainian armed forces has a shortage of ammunition in the region. Ukrainian authorities have been asking for urgent ammunition support from the West for the past few days. These days, Ukraine's ammunition warehouses are still full, but it is stated that these stocks will melt if the war continues in this course in the coming days. In Russia, the situation is not different. Russia's advanced precision-guided munitions shortage is increasing in the region, and Moscow is focusing on this issue. Resolving this issue is of vital importance for the Kremlin. This fact becomes even greater when one considers how Putin aspired to victory in Donbass. Ukrainian armed forces' intense street-to-street fighting with Russian forces around Severodonetsk continues, with both sides likely suffering large casualties. According to British military intelligence, Russia is firing with artillery and air capabilities to defeat the Ukrainian defenses. There is a downside to these intense attacks. Because, Even if the intense ammunition used suffocates the Ukrainian armed forces, it also ensures that the Russian stocks are rapidly depleted. Currently, 70-year-old T-62 tanks are used in the Russian army. The Russian army has launched more than 2,600 cruise missiles since the beginning of the war, and now its modern missiles are exhausted. Since April, Russian medium bombers have launched heavy anti-ship missiles against ground targets, possibly launched from the 1960s-era Kh-22. These 5.5-ton missiles were designed primarily to destroy aircraft carriers using a nuclear warhead. Used in a ground attack role with a conventional warhead, they are highly inaccurate and can therefore cause significant collateral damage and civilian casualties. While the UK's Ministry of Defence has deterred tactical aircraft of Ukrainian air defences from attacking much of the country, Russia is likely resorting to such inefficient weapon systems because more precise modern missiles are insufficient. Even when Russia is struggling with its limited ammunition in the region, it has many more weapons than the ones in the inventory of the Ukrainian armed forces. In their statements, Ukrainian officials state that Russia has 20 artillery for one artillery piece of Ukraine, and Russia has 40 ammunition for one ammunition of Ukraine. In other words, Russia has 20 times more artillery and 40 times more ammunition than Ukraine. It is also reported that 40 BTGs of the Russian army are kept in reserve. Even though this huge difference is tried to be met with the latest technology artillery sent to Ukraine, Russia's surplus of ammunition gives the Russian army an advantage in long-lasting conflicts. As far as we have observed in the last 2 months, it is seen that one US-made M777 howitzer unit is worth at least 3 Russian howitzer units, and French Caesar self-propelled howitzers are worth at least 5 Russian howitzers. However, Ukraine cannot survive without more ammunition in its current war of attrition. Ukraine announced yesterday how many weapons it needs to defeat Russia. According to the statement made by Ukraine, it is stated that at least 1,000 howitzers and 300 MLRS, 1,000 drones, 500 tanks, 2,000 armored combat vehicles are needed to defeat Russia. Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, stated that Russian troops have between 10 and 15 pieces of artillery for each piece of Ukrainian artillery, and that the Ukrainian forces have almost completely exhausted their artillery ammunition. Given the current prevalence of prolonged position warfare, especially in the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk region, the Ukrainian forces urgently need new artillery systems. As Ukrainian forces use the last of their Soviet-era weapon systems and stockpiles of ammunition, they will need consistent Western support to transition to new ammunition supply chains and key artillery systems. Effective artillery will be more and more decisive in the largely static warfare in eastern Ukraine. In fact, it was clear that the war in Ukraine would turn into an artillery war with the failure of the siege in Kiev and Russia's turn towards the Donbass. Because Russia has a much more established order in the east of Ukraine, and Ukraine also needs to use artillery units to attack the Russian army in this order. The Russian forces, on the other hand, are making slow advances, advancing their artillery in a protected manner and reflecting this power to the region. This tactic is partially working and the Russian army is advancing. However, the irrecoverable losses continue to increase. It is reported that a total of over 32,000 Russian soldiers have died and nearly 100,000 Russian soldiers have been injured in Ukraine so far. Subsequently, 220 warplanes and 180 attack and transport helicopters, as well as 580 tactical drones, were destroyed. In addition to these, the loss of nearly 1,500 Russian tanks and the loss of more than 2,600 Russian armored vehicles reveal the stalemate Russia is in. In addition, the increasing unrest in the Russian army, the attitude of the Scandinavian and Baltic countries towards Russia, and the world companies withdrawing from the Russian economy, whose balances have deteriorated, are among Russia's major losses. Even if you are the second largest military power in the world, compensation for these losses becomes impossible when combined with the heavy sanctions of